He woke up to the sound of the cold wind rattling against the broken windows of the abandoned building where he had spent the night. The concrete floor beneath him was hard and unwelcoming, but it was better than sleeping on the bare pavement outside. His stomach grumbled, a reminder that he had not eaten since yesterday. He wrapped his thin jacket tighter around himself, trying to hold on to whatever warmth he could find, and slowly got to his feet. Each movement brought a sharp ache in his back and legs, a constant reminder that his body was as tired as his spirit. He had learned long ago to move quietly, to avoid attention. People often looked away when they saw someone like him, someone who smelled of the streets, whose clothes were patched and worn. Most of them didn't even notice his face, let alone the emotions behind it. But he had a secret world inside him, one that no one could touch. That world was made of colors, shapes, and dreams. He carried it everywhere. In the little notebook that was always in his pocket, and in the tiny set of pencils he kept hidden from anyone who might steal them. The city was waking up around him. Cars honked, people hurried past on the sidewalks, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from a nearby bakery. He looked at the scene with a mixture of longing and resignation. He had once dreamed of being part of this world, not just existing on the edges of it. But dreams seemed to belong to others, not to someone like him. Still, he clutched his notebook and pencils as if they were lifelines, because in them, he could live the life he imagined. Even if just for a few hours each day, finding a spot to sit and draw was always a challenge. Today, he chose a corner near a park, where the morning sun had begun to warm the pavement. He spread out a small piece of cardboard as his makeshift table, placing his notebook on top. Each page was a story, a world of colors that seemed more alive than the gray streets around him. He started to sketch, his hands moving with a precision that belied the roughness of his life. Trees, buildings, people he had seen in the city, all appeared on the page with a vibrancy that contrasted sharply with his own reality. Passers-by hardly noticed him. Some glanced curiously, some sneered, but most avoided eye contact. A few tossed coins into his small tin cup, and he nodded politely, not daring to smile too broadly. Gratitude and embarrassment mixed together in a strange way that he had learned to accept. Money was always scarce, and any little help was precious. He had to choose between buying food, a notebook, or pencils, often going without one or the other. But the act of drawing, even without anything to sell it for, gave him a sense of control. A reminder that he was more than the clothes he wore or the empty stomach he carried. He remembered the early years when he had first picked up a pencil and realized he could make something beautiful with it. He had been a child then, living in a small apartment with parents who struggled to make ends meet. They could not understand his obsession with drawing, thinking it was a waste of time when he should be focusing on school or work. But he had drawn anyway, sneaking moments whenever he could. Those early sketches were crude, but they carried a fire, a raw honesty that would never leave him. Over time, his talent grew, but life grew harsher. Illness, debts, and bad luck slowly pushed him out of the home he loved, and eventually he found himself on the streets, carrying only memories and the gift of his art. Today he drew a simple scene: a young boy sitting by a fountain, his eyes filled with wonder as he watched the water dance in the morning light. He imagined himself as that boy sometimes, dreaming of possibilities beyond the cold streets and the harsh looks of strangers. People walked by, some stopping briefly to watch his hands move across the page, but none stayed long enough to see the world he created. He did not mind. It was enough for him to make it, to prove to himself that beauty could exist even in the most unlikely places. The hours passed slowly. Hunger gnawed at him, and his hands ached from holding the pencil too tightly, but he could not stop. Each stroke was a small victory, a declaration that he still mattered. Occasionally, someone would offer a word of encouragement, a rare kindness that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. But most of the time, he worked in silence, unnoticed and alone, carrying a sense of pride that no one could take away. By midday, the park had filled with people. Children laughed and played, their parents chatting nearby. He watched them, longing for connection, for the simple joy of being part of a community. He had friends once, before life had turned cruel. But those friendships had faded, leaving only echoes of laughter and warmth in his memory. Now, the only companionship he had was the voice inside him. It was the one that whispered stories and painted dreams when no one else would listen. Occasionally, he would fold a completed sketch into a small envelope and set it aside, hoping that someday someone would see it and understand. Sometimes he imagined that a gallery owner might stumble upon his work and recognize the talent he carried. Other times, he thought it pointless, that he would remain invisible forever. Still, he drew, because drawing was breathing, and breathing was surviving. As the sun climbed higher, he felt the first pangs of doubt. He was fooling himself, thinking that a homeless man could ever be more than invisible. But then he would look at his drawings, at the small universe he had built on paper, and feel a spark of hope. That spark was fragile, easily crushed, but it refused to die. It reminded him that even in the darkest corners, light could exist, and that one day someone might see it. He packed up his belongings as the shadows grew longer. His stomach ached, but the notebook was full of new creations, each page a testament to resilience and imagination. He found a quiet spot near a fountain, watching the water ripple and reflect the colors of the setting sun. In those moments, he felt a strange peace, as if the world had paused to acknowledge his existence. He knew that tomorrow would bring the same struggle, the same hunger, and the same invisibility. But tonight, he could rest, knowing that he had lived another day in his own way. He curled up under a thin blanket, clutching his notebook to his chest. The streets were cold, the nights long, and the future uncertain, but his mind was alive with possibility. He dreamed of galleries, of colors that would leap off walls, of people who would stop and feel something when they saw his art. For now, those dreams were just that, dreams, but they were enough to keep him moving, to keep his heart beating with purpose. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, he whispered a quiet promise to himself. No matter how hard life became, no matter how many ignored glances or cold shoulders he faced, he would never stop creating. Because in a world that had forgotten him, he still had the power to remember himself. Sometimes, that was the most important thing of all. The next morning, the streets were busier than usual. People hurried past, eyes focused on their own lives, barely noticing the world around them. He had found a sheltered corner near the park, a spot that offered a little warmth from the early winter sun. His notebook and pencils were ready, and he started sketching immediately. Today, his hand moved differently, as if the pencils knew that something unusual might happen. He drew with care, his mind immersed in the details, the curve of a child's smile, the glint of sunlight on a puddle, the gentle sway of tree branches in the breeze. As he worked, he noticed someone watching him. First he thought it was just another passerby, someone who glanced at the drawings briefly before moving on. But this time was different. The man standing there did not look away. His posture was confident, his clothes expensive, and there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. He looked at each stroke of the pencil, his eyes lingering on the smallest details, as if he could see the emotions behind them. For a moment, the artist froze, unsure if he should acknowledge the attention. He was used to people ignoring him or treating him as invisible. Being watched so carefully felt both strange and alarming. The man finally stepped closer, and the artist instinctively took a small step back. The man did not reach for the drawings, did not make a sudden move. He simply watched, letting his eyes absorb the work. Then he said, softly, almost hesitantly, "These are remarkable." "Did you make all of these?" The question startled him. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Most people dismissed him before even looking at his work, but here was someone who genuinely seemed to care. He nodded, his fingers twitching over the pencil, as if uncertain whether to continue. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. I draw every day." The man's eyes softened. "You have real talent. These are not just drawings, they feel alive." He crouched slightly to get a better look at one of the sketches, a scene of a young girl sitting on a bench, her eyes wide with wonder as she watched a bird land nearby. The artist had poured his loneliness and longing into the piece, and somehow the man could see it. He nodded, impressed, as if he understood something deeper about the person behind the pencil. "Do you sell your work?" the man asked. The artist hesitated. He had sold small sketches before, usually for a few coins from people passing by. But no one had ever taken his work seriously. Sometimes, he admitted, if someone wants to buy them. The man smiled faintly, a warmth in his eyes that was unusual in the harsh city streets. I would like to buy one. But not just to hang it on a wall. I want people to see your talent, to understand what you can do. The offer confused him. People rarely showed interest beyond giving money for food or a drink. This man wanted more than that. He wanted recognition and opportunity. He shook his head slightly, unsure if it was real. I don't know. I'm just a street artist. The man shook his head, smiling. Talents like this don't belong just to the streets. You deserve more. Would you come with me? I have a place where your work can be seen by many people. The artist's heart raced. The idea was almost impossible to believe. No one had ever offered him a real chance, a real opportunity to share his talent. He thought of the risks, trusting someone who could be a stranger, stepping out of his familiar world, but something in the man's eyes felt genuine, honest, and more importantly, it felt like hope. After a long pause, he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. I'll come. The man extended his hand, not to grasp, but to guide gently. They walked together through the busy streets, and for the first time, the artist felt the world shift around him. The city that had always felt cold and indifferent suddenly seemed alive, full of possibilities he had only dreamed of. He noticed the way the light fell on buildings, the sounds of conversations, the small details he had often ignored while surviving. But now, there was a sense of purpose, a reason to see it all in a new way. They arrived at a large building with glass walls that reflected the morning sun. Inside, it was bright and spacious, filled with paintings, sculptures, and art from around the world. The artist's eyes widened. He had never been in a place like this. The smell of fresh paint and polished wood was overwhelming but exciting. The man led him through the gallery, introducing him to assistants and curators, each one nodding respectfully at his presence. He felt out of place, yet oddly accepted, as if his work had given him a new identity. Finally, they reached a private studio at the back of the gallery. The man gestured for him to sit and placed a cup of tea in front of him. This will be your space, he said. You can draw here as much as you like, and when you're ready, we can show your work to others. People need to see what you can do. The artist stared at the cup, then at the empty walls around him. It was more than he had ever imagined. His hand shook slightly, not from fear but from the sheer weight of possibility. I don't know what to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything, the man replied. Just create. That's enough for now. The first hours in the studio were strange. He set up his pencils and notebook, touched by the sunlight streaming through large windows. The space felt safe, welcoming, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of calm. He began to sketch again, letting his emotions flow freely, exploring ideas he had only imagined while on the streets. The walls seemed to listen. The light seemed to encourage him. He worked as if the world outside no longer existed. Days passed, and the billionaire returned often. He did not interfere, but observed quietly, asking occasional questions about the inspiration behind the pieces. Each time the artist shared stories of the streets, of loneliness, of dreams that had never had a chance. The man listened patiently, never judging, never rushing, and slowly a bond formed between them. It was not friendship in the usual sense, but something deeper, connection built on trust, respect, and a shared appreciation for beauty. Word began to spread about the artist's work. Gallery visitors, curators, and collectors were intrigued by the raw emotion and unique perspective in his sketches. Unlike the polished art that dominated exhibitions, his work felt alive, authentic, and deeply human. People who had never thought twice about street artists suddenly wanted to know more about him, to understand the life that had produced such powerful images. Despite the growing attention, he remained humble, grounded in the reality of where he had come from. He remembered the cold nights on the streets, the hunger that had gnawed at him, and the indifference of a world that had often ignored him. That memory kept him focused, reminding him that talent alone was not enough. Grit, perseverance, and the will to continue had carried him to this point. One evening, As the gallery closed and the staff left, the billionaire stayed behind to speak with him. "You have changed more than just this space," he said quietly. "Your art has reminded me of something I had forgotten, that life is not just about success or money, but about feeling, connecting, and seeing the world with new eyes." The artist looked up, surprised. He had not expected his work to affect anyone so profoundly, let alone someone who had everything he could ever want. I just draw what I feel," he said softly. "And that is enough," the man replied. "More than enough. You have given me a gift I did not know I needed." That night, the artist went home to the small room the gallery had provided for him. It was modest, with a bed and a desk, but it was a place he could call his own. As he lay down clutching his notebook, he thought about how life could change in an instant, how a single encounter could open doors he had never dreamed existed. He closed his eyes, not with fear or worry, but with anticipation, eager to see what the next day might bring in this new chapter of his life. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his art could change everything, not only his life, but the lives of those who were willing to see it with their hearts. The artist's days had begun to change, though the streets he had left behind were never far from his thoughts. Every morning, he would wake up in the small room the gallery had provided for him, its walls clean and welcoming, a space that belonged to him for the first time in years. The simple routine of preparing his pencils, arranging his notebooks, and moving to the studio gave him a sense of purpose he had longed for, structure he had never experienced while living on the streets. Each day began with drawing, pouring every emotion into the sketches as if he could release all the years of hardship through his art. The billionaire continued to visit, sometimes quietly observing, other times offering gentle guidance. He never imposed, never demanded a particular style or subject, but he encouraged the artist to explore, to experiment with ideas that had been confined to dreams before. He suggested trying new techniques, adding color, and even capturing emotions he had never dared to depict. The artist hesitated at first, unsure whether his instincts could carry him into unknown territory. But each time he tried, he discovered a new part of his own ability, realizing that his talent was not just in copying what he saw, but in translating what he felt. The gallery began to take notice. Curators would visit the studio, intrigued by the reports of a street artist whose work had a depth and emotion unlike anything they had seen. They watched silently, impressed by the authenticity in every line and stroke. Some purchased pieces immediately, while others spoke of exhibiting them in larger shows. The artist was cautious, nervous about leaving the safety of the studio for larger crowds. But the billionaire reassured him, explaining that the world needed to see what he could create. For the first time, the artist felt the weight of recognition. It was both exhilarating and frightening. People were no longer ignoring him. They were watching, analyzing, and even praising. Each compliment felt strange and almost unbelievable, as if he were listening to someone describe another person entirely. Yet, through it all, he stayed grounded, remembering the cold nights on the streets and the moments when no one had cared. Those memories reminded him to stay humble, to keep drawing with honesty, and not let success change who he was. As the days passed, he grew closer to the billionaire, though their relationship remained one of mutual respect rather than friendship in the usual sense. They would talk about life, dreams, and sometimes the struggles of being human. The billionaire, once accustomed to wealth and luxury, began to see the world differently through the eyes of someone who had experienced hardship. He learned patience, empathy, and the beauty of creating something purely from the heart. In turn, the artist began to understand that not all people with wealth were disconnected from humanity. Some could see beyond appearances and value sincerity over status. One afternoon, the billionaire suggested that they hold a small exhibition of the artist's work. The idea terrified him at first. He had spent so long hiding his art from the world, fearing rejection and ridicule, that the thought of public display was overwhelming. But the man's encouragement, combined with the subtle excitement that had been growing inside him, made him agree. They spent days preparing, selecting pieces that told stories of struggle, hope, and resilience. Each drawing was chosen with care, each one representing a part of his journey that he wanted others to feel. the night of the exhibition arrived. The gallery was filled with people, the hum of conversation creating a lively backdrop. Visitors moved from piece to piece, some pausing longer, others speaking quietly to companions about the depth and honesty they saw. The artist stood in a corner, watching silently, a mixture of anxiety and pride coursing through him. He noticed faces light up when they saw his work, heard whispers of admiration, and felt a warmth he had never experienced before. For the first time, he realized that his art had the power to touch others in a way that words could not. A collector approached him, speaking politely, but with genuine interest. "These pieces are remarkable. They capture emotion like no one else. I would like to acquire several for my private collection." The artist nodded, unsure of what to say. He had never imagined that someone would see value in his work beyond the streets, where he had once sold sketches for a few coins. Each offer, each compliment, felt surreal. Yet it affirmed that he had found a place in the world where he belonged. As the night went on, he noticed the billionaire moving among the guests, speaking softly to curators and admirers. The man returned, occasionally checking on him, offering a reassuring smile. The artist felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the way this person had believed in him when no one else had. The connection went beyond art. It was a bond formed from understanding and trust, an acknowledgement that sometimes a single person could change the course of another's life. After the exhibition, they walked through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement from a recent rain. The artist felt a new sense of freedom, as if the world had expanded in ways he could never have imagined. They talked, hesitantly, sharing memories of the streets, the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness he had endured. The billionaire listened, never interrupting, letting him speak, understanding that these stories were part of what made his art so compelling. In the days following the exhibition, the artist's life began to transform further. He was invited to collaborate on larger projects. Commissions came in from people who had been touched by his work, and he even began teaching small workshops to young, aspiring artists who struggled to be heard. Each new experience was daunting, yet exhilarating. He discovered that sharing his talent brought joy not only to others, but also to himself, creating a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. Despite the growing demands on his time, he remained disciplined, always starting each day with drawing, grounding himself in the work that had carried him this far. He experimented with new mediums, tried bold techniques, and explored themes he had never dared to address before. Each piece told a story, some joyful, some melancholic, but all authentic, reflection of the journey from the streets to this new world of possibility. One evening, as he was finishing a large canvas, the billionaire entered the studio quietly. He watched for a moment, his eyes tracing the lines and colors with a thoughtful expression. "You've grown so much," he said softly. "Not just as an artist, but as a person. I am proud of what you've accomplished." The artist paused, a lump forming in his throat. Had never been praised like this for anything other than mere survival. I couldn't have done it without you," he whispered. "You saw something in me that no one else did." The man shook his head. "You always had it. I only helped you see it for yourself." They stood together in silence, the studio filled with the quiet hum of creativity. The artist realized that his life had changed not just because of recognition or opportunity, but because someone had chosen to believe in him. That belief had unlocked something inside him, giving him courage, confidence, and the freedom to pursue his dreams fully. In the months that followed, the artist continued to grow, both personally and professionally. He traveled to exhibitions, met other artists, and saw the impact of his work on countless people. Yet he never forgot the streets that had shaped him, the nights spent cold and alone, and the resilience that had kept him alive. Those memories remained a foundation, a reminder that art could emerge from even the harshest circumstances, and that hope, no matter how small, could change everything. Through it all, the billionaire remained a constant presence, a silent supporter who understood that talent alone was not enough. It took guidance, trust, and opportunity to transform potential into reality. Together, they navigated this new world, one sketch, one exhibition, and one moment of shared understanding at a time. The artist had not only found his place in the world, but had discovered the power of human connection. The knowledge that when someone truly believes in you, life can shift in ways you never imagined, opening doors that once seemed forever closed. The artist woke up early that morning, sunlight streaming through the window of his small studio apartment in the gallery's building. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from late nights spent drawing, and glanced at his notebook stacked neatly on the desk. Each page was filled with new ideas, sketches, and experiments, a record of his journey from the streets to this moment. He felt a quiet excitement, knowing that today might bring something new. Another opportunity to share his work with the world. He prepared for the day carefully, choosing pencils, brushes, and paints. Each tool was familiar now, and he handled them with the confidence that had grown through months of practice and encouragement. The studio, once a strange and intimidating space, had become a sanctuary where he could explore freely, experiment without fear, and lose himself in the process of creation. Today he decided to work on a larger canvas, something he had avoided before, unsure if he had the skill or courage, but something inside him urged him forward. A quiet voice reminding him that growth required risk. As he painted, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. Life on the streets had been harsh, unforgiving, and lonely. He remembered nights huddled under blankets, shivering in the cold, and mornings when hunger gnawed at his stomach. Yet those experiences had shaped him, giving depth to his work that no formal training could provide. Every line he drew, every color he applied, carried fragments of those moments, the resilience, the longing, and the unbroken spirit that had refused to give up. The gallery had been buzzing with excitement recently. Word of his work had spread, and curators, collectors, and art enthusiasts were eager to see more. Invitations to exhibitions, interviews, and features began to arrive, each one a reminder that his art had reached beyond the narrow world of survival on the streets. While he felt nervous about public attention, he also recognized the importance of sharing his perspective, the truth of his experiences, and the emotions that had been locked inside him for so long. One afternoon, he was visited by a curator who had heard about his growing reputation. The curator spoke with genuine interest, examining the sketches and paintings laid out across his studio. "Your work is extraordinary," she said. "Captures a raw humanity that is rare in the art world. We would like to feature you in a prominent exhibition next month." The artist's hands trembled slightly. He had dreamed of recognition, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone respected in the art community made it feel real in a way he had never imagined. I don't know what to say," he replied softly.
Oh, man.
"I never thought anyone would care about my work beyond the streets." The curator smiled warmly. "Your talent deserves to be seen. People need to experience the depth of feeling your work conveys. You have a story that can inspire others, and your art speaks for itself." The billionaire, who had become a constant presence in his life, entered the studio quietly, listening to the conversation. He gave a small nod as if to say, "See? This is your time." The artist felt a surge of gratitude, not only for the opportunities, but for the person who had believed in him when no one else did. Over the following weeks, the artist prepared for the exhibition, selecting pieces that told his story. Pieces that carried the weight of struggle and hope. Each painting was a chapter of his journey, a reflection of resilience, and a testament to the beauty that could emerge even from hardship. The gallery helped with arrangements, ensuring the lighting, placement, and flow of the exhibition highlighted the emotion in each work. When the day of the exhibition arrived, the gallery was filled with people from all walks of life. Art enthusiasts, collectors, journalists, and curious onlookers moved through the space. Drawn to the authenticity and depth of the artist's work, he stood quietly in the corner, observing reactions, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and nervousness. Some people paused, eyes misting, touched by the emotions conveyed through color and line. Others discussed the technique, the originality, and the storytelling embedded in each piece. Throughout the day, visitors approached him, asking questions about his inspiration, his process, and his journey. He spoke cautiously at first, sharing fragments of his past, the struggles that had shaped him, and the moments of perseverance that had kept him going. People listened with empathy, nodding and expressing admiration. For the first time, he felt that his story, his art, and his existence mattered in a way that went beyond mere survival. The billionaire stayed nearby, observing quietly but with a subtle pride in his eyes. He had seen the artist's potential from the start, and now that potential was blossoming into recognition and impact. The connection between them had grown into a quiet understanding, mutual respect that transcended the roles of mentor and mentee. They shared the knowledge that trust, belief, and opportunity could transform a life. As the exhibition continued, the artist realized that he was changing as well. The attention, praise, and validation were not only external, they stirred something within him, a confidence and self-respect that had long been dormant. He saw himself not just as a survivor, but as a creator, someone who could shape the world around him through his vision and his heart. The streets that had once defined him now felt like distant memories, essential, but no longer constraining. He had grown, evolved, and was finally beginning to inhabit the life he had dreamed of. After the exhibition, he returned to his studio, exhausted but exhilarated. He sat by the window, looking out at the city skyline, and reflected on how far he had come. The memories of cold nights, hunger, and loneliness were still there, etched into his soul. But they were no longer a source of shame or despair. They had become part of the story he was telling through his art, a testament to resilience, hope, and the human spirit. He began to explore new opportunities, collaborating with other artists, contributing to charitable projects, and teaching young people who had faced similar hardships. He realized that his journey could inspire others, showing that even from the darkest circumstances, talent, perseverance, and a little encouragement could create a path to a better life. The joy he felt in sharing his work and his experiences was profound, a fulfillment he had never known while struggling to survive on the streets. The billionaire remained a guiding presence, offering advice, support, and encouragement without imposing control. Together, they navigated the challenges of recognition, public attention, and creative growth. The artist learned to balance the demands of success with the need to remain authentic, staying true to the emotions and experiences that had made his work unique. Through it all, the artist discovered a deeper truth. Life was not just about survival or recognition, but about connection, meaning, and the ability to touch the hearts of others. His art had become a bridge, linking his experiences to the emotions of those who viewed it, creating understanding and empathy where once there had been only indifference. He realized that the power of creativity, combined with opportunity and belief, could transform lives in ways that went far beyond material success. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city, the artist sat in his studio, surrounded by his creations. Each painting, each sketch, was a reminder of the journey from the streets to this moment, a journey shaped by struggle, resilience, and the quiet kindness of someone who had seen his potential when no one else did. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for the recognition and success, but for the realization that he had the power to change not only his life, but the lives of others through his art. And as night fell, he picked up his pencil once more, ready to continue creating, knowing that the journey was far from over, but confident that he was finally on a path where his heart, his talent, and his spirit could flourish fully, touching the world in ways he had only dreamed of while living in the shadows of the streets. The artist awoke with the sunrise, light spilling through the window of his studio, painting the room in warm shades of gold and orange. He stretched, feeling a calm satisfaction in his body, a sense of belonging he had never known before. Over the past months, his life had transformed in ways he had only imagined in his wildest dreams. Yet he remained humble, aware of the journey that had brought him to this point. Each day was a new opportunity, a chance to create, inspire, and continue building a life shaped by his own hands. He began his morning by walking through the city streets, no longer with the fear or hesitation of someone invisible, but with a quiet confidence. Feeling part of a world he had once watched from the margins, people noticed him, some recognizing his face from exhibitions, others from the news or online features. Children pointed to him excitedly, admiring his work. and even strangers offered polite greetings, intrigued by the talent and story they had heard about. Each interaction reminded him of how far he had come, and how art had the power to bridge gaps between lives that seemed worlds apart. Back in his studio, he arranged his supplies and opened a fresh notebook, ready to begin the day's work. Inspiration had been flowing more freely lately. Months of experience, reflection, and encouragement had allowed him to explore emotions he had once suppressed. He painted with a freedom that surprised him, blending colors in ways that captured the subtlety of hope, loss, joy, and resilience. Each stroke carried a piece of his history, a memory, a moment of struggle, and a triumph over the hardships that had defined much of his life. The billionaire visited, as he often did, not with instructions, but with quiet presence. He stood in the doorway, watching the artist's work, a faint smile on his lips. "Your work continues to grow," he said softly. "It has touched many people, and I believe it will continue to do so. You have a gift that extends beyond technique. It speaks directly to the heart." The artist paused, meeting his gaze. "I never thought anyone would see what I was trying to express. I painted because I had to, because it was the only way to survive inside my own mind. I never imagined it could affect someone else." "And yet it does," the man replied gently. "It changes lives, including your own. You have shown that creativity, when combined with perseverance, can open doors even in a world that seems indifferent. You've given hope not just to yourself, but to countless others who may be struggling." As the days passed, invitations came for larger exhibitions, collaborations with other artists, and even opportunities to donate part of his work for charitable causes. The artist embraced these experiences with a thoughtful approach, recognizing the importance of giving back, of using his talent to inspire and assist those who faced circumstances he had once known too well. He met young artists from underprivileged backgrounds, teaching them techniques and sharing his story, showing them that no matter how difficult life seemed, passion, dedication, and guidance could create a path forward. One evening, after a long day of painting and mentoring, the billionaire invited him to his home, a space filled with art, books, and light. They walked through the large rooms, observing collections from around the world. The artist felt a mixture of awe and gratitude, aware of the contrast between this life and the streets he had once called home. Yet he did not feel intimidated. He felt understood, respected, and encouraged. He realized that wealth was not what made this person remarkable. It was the ability to see the value in others, to nurture potential without judgment or expectation. Sitting together, the billionaire spoke with quiet reflection. "You have changed more than just your own life. You've reminded me and many others that value is not measured by wealth, status, or position. True richness comes from understanding, empathy, and the ability to connect with what is real and meaningful." The artist nodded, feeling a deep resonance in those words. "I never wanted fame or money," he said softly. "I just wanted to be seen, to be heard through my art. I wanted to feel that my life had meaning, even when the world ignored me." "You have done that," the man replied, "and more. You've inspired hope, reminded people of resilience, and brought attention to the beauty that can exist even in hardship. That is a power few ever experience, and you wield it naturally." Over time, the artist's work continued to evolve, reflecting the complexity of human emotions and experiences. His exhibitions drew crowds, each person finding something personal in the brushstrokes, the colors and the stories embedded within the pieces. The artist realized that his own journey, once filled with despair and uncertainty, had become a beacon, illustrating that life could change through creativity, opportunity, and the belief of someone willing to see beyond the surface. He also took steps to ensure that his past struggles were not forgotten. He contributed to organizations that supported homeless individuals, providing resources, mentorship, and inspiration for those who felt trapped in circumstances beyond their control. His art became a tool for change, bridging the gap between hardship and hope, and demonstrating that compassion and encouragement could transform lives in ways that money alone could not. The relationship between the artist and the billionaire deepened into a quiet, unspoken bond built on respect, shared experience, and the understanding of what it meant to nurture potential. The man had changed as much as the artist. He had learned empathy, patience, and the importance of recognizing humanity where it was often overlooked. Their connection was a testament to the idea that sometimes the lives of two very different people could be transformed by the simple act of noticing, believing, and supporting one another. On a clear evening, the artist stood by a large window in his studio, looking out at the city lights, reflecting off the buildings and streets below. He thought about the nights he had spent on cold pavement, the hunger that had gnawed at him, and the loneliness that had defined so much of his early life. Those memories were painful but no longer overwhelming. They were part of the story that had shaped him, part of the foundation of resilience and creativity that now allowed him to thrive. He picked up a brush and began a new painting, one that captured the journey he had taken, the emotions he had experienced, and the hope that had guided him forward. Each stroke was deliberate, infused with gratitude and awareness. He worked late into the night, feeling a sense of completion not just in the artwork but in himself. He was no longer the person defined by hardship. He was an artist, a mentor, and a creator whose life now carried meaning beyond survival. The world had opened to him, not through luck alone, but because of his perseverance, talent, and the kindness of someone who had chosen to see his potential. That realization filled him with quiet joy, a sense of purpose that went beyond personal success. He had transformed his life, and in doing so, had touched the hearts of countless others, showing that even a single act of belief, a single moment of recognition, could ripple outward and change everything. As he placed the final touches on the painting, he felt a deep sense of peace. The streets of his past, the struggles, and the nights of uncertainty were not forgotten, but they no longer held power over him. His art, his perseverance, and the belief of someone who had seen him as more than invisible had changed everything. And in that transformation, both he and the billionaire had discovered a truth that would stay with them forever. Sometimes, the simplest acts of creativity and recognition could open hearts, change lives, and reveal the extraordinary in the ordinary. He stood back, looking at the finished piece, and smiled quietly. It was more than a painting. It was a testament to survival, hope, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. And as he set down his brush, he knew that the journey was not over, that life still held challenges and surprises, but he was ready for them, armed with talent, resilience, and the knowledge that even in the darkest circumstances, light could be found and hearts could be changed forever.